It's House of Strauss. It's Ryan Glasspiegel, the preeminent sports media critic from the New York Post, wearing his Green Bay Packers hat because he's such a Packers fan. He wanted to do a podcast. He wanted to discuss things so much. He had so many takes, pulsating, percolating, that he is doing this beside his infant. He is doing double duty, folks. He is podcasting and parenting simultaneously. Ryan, what is so damn interesting, and how are you doing?
I don't know. I just felt like it's been a few weeks. We've had the election in between. There's some other raring media stories going on. You had Nick Wright on yesterday, and you wanted to discuss some bounce off issues.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I think that my baby can behave for an hour, as long as I'm in her direct vicinity. And so far, so good. Knock on wood. We'll show the audience on YouTube maybe a little bit if we're reaching if we're reaching a good moment for it, or if she starts going crazy. But I think she's going to be good.
Did you lose some of the money that should have gone to that baby betting on Kamala Harris on Kalshi? Is that what happened, Ryan?
Okay, so I did, but my stock portfolio has been up more than what I lost on Kalshi.
Hedged.
Based on hedged. Based on the outcome of the election. So I don't think you need to weep for little old Ryan here.
Okay. I was worried when you texted me in the morning. You were texting me election day that it looked like there was heavy turnout in Philadelphia. And I was thinking at that time, Ryan's going to lose money trying to get the good price on Kamala Harris. Well, I think, just so people know, I don't think Ryan made that bet in accordance to wanting a certain outcome. It was a pure play, a pure undervalued play.
I thought it was a coin flip, and she was valued at under 40%. And so, I thought there was like a 25% premium to the position I was getting, where Ryan was wrong.
Yeah. Well, we can go into where I was wrong in terms of the election, but of course take a little victory lap on where I was right. Although I held my position tepidly. In my head, I had her at 10%. I had her at 10% because of the early vote. But there's always that thing where you go, I don't know completely. It's this, I feel like I'm looking at what I'm looking at, but I'm not getting a lot of validation that what I'm looking at is what I'm looking at. So am I the one who's crazy? Am I the one who's not seeing it correctly? So I didn't have full confidence. I think if I had full confidence, I would have taken out all our savings and, made money off of it. And I did not do that. But I just looked at the early vote. The early vote to me was just, oh, it's done. It's finished. This is already over. They're too far behind. I think I said on the podcast that it's sort of like being behind in the fourth quarter pretty heavily, and lo and behold, it was actually closer in the Midwest than I thought it would be, Ryan. It was, but I thought dead on arrival was what I was going in with.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought it was a coin flip. I just figured, there are a lot of people who really don't like Trump, and clearly he has a lot of his supporters. And I just thought, I don't want to sound like I'm going to get painted as an election conspiracy theorist on this, but this is a friendly audience. So, I go at it from both sides would cheat if they could. If either side is like, okay, I can cheat and I can get away with this and there's no way I'll be caught, I'll do it. And I thought that in those swing states that the Democrats controlled the governor house and the mayors of the big cities. And so if there's like a way to juke the stats, then maybe that breaks the tie. So I don't know. It's all silly. And it's not all silly. There's real world consequences of it. But I'm just talking about
how dare you be glib.
It's silly how I was evaluating my bet. I also lost on the popular vote. By the way, there was like a time where Kamala got up to like 80% to win the popular vote in the gambling odds. And so you could have made a lot of money. If you had any inkling that Trump was like even close to a coin flip to win the popular vote, you could have made a fortune betting on that. That was a market that was way off. Like at Polymarket and Kalshi have gotten a lot of credit for being ahead of the curve on Trump's overall victory. But, you know, even during election day, it got up to like 80% on Kamala to win the popular vote, and clearly that didn't happen. So there's like this idea that the betting markets know everything. They don't.
No.
But it's easy to say in retrospect because Trump was leading for weeks in the gambling markets to win the electoral college that they were, really ahead of the curve. And I don't, based on what I just said, I don't totally subscribe to that idea.
Yeah, I think that what was happening there is that the gambling markets were incorporating some of what was out there with the early vote. Not totally, because then they would have regarded Trump as an overwhelming favorite. But I think there was some of that incorporation, whereas the way these things have been done for so long, it's just polls. It's only polls, and that was coin flip. And so I think the betting markets were just a little bit more into incorporating the new stuff, the new way we do elections, where we have half the election over before we have election day.
Did you read at all about that polymarket whale? So there was this
the
French
government
trader
is taking his phone. Oh no, you're talking about the whale,
that's
not
the
the polymarket
founder. I have a take on that too, but put a pin in that. That's what's known in the business as a tease. But the polymarket whale was this like French trader who put his entire like 30 million life savings on Trump to win. And he like the whole reason that the polymarket odds shifted so drastically was because of like this guy. And he was so in it that like if he like tried to exit his position at all, he would have collapsed his own position. And so he was like really, really committed. And so he was profiled by the Wall Street Journal days before the election. And like everyone was just like making fun of him. It's like, oh my God, the guy shifting the market doesn't actually know anything more than anyone else. This guy, Connor Sen, who is like influential in like finance and econ Twitter, was saying, oh, this is a guy with replacement level thoughts. And it turns out not quite replacement level. And then he explained after the election what more of his methodology was, which was he commissioned his own polls from like an unnamed like influential polling company, and now is no, you can't eat a lighter. What are you doing, Jordy? And so after the election, he said that he commissioned his own polls to do the like what he did the neighbor polling method. I don't know, whatever it's called. And he said,
Trafalgar. Trafalgar pioneered that. So they're more Republican, but they've had some success in some cycles through the. I'm fascinated by the neighbor polling. Sorry for interrupting. Talk about the neighbor polling.
So he commissioned that and said, like he figured that there is this like social like stigma to saying that you're a Trump supporter. And so he didn't think, and that's been true for now 3 straight elections, is that the polls have been inaccurate and underestimated him, potentially for that reason, potentially because these like deep rural voters aren't as reachable, potentially because a Trump supporter is probably more likely to tell a pollster to fuck off than a non-Trump supporter. And so for whatever reasons, the polls have like wildly underestimated him for 3 straight cycles. But this French trader who put $30 million on Trump was just like, he commissioned a poll where they were like, who do you think your neighbors will support? And he found out that this methodology just overwhelmingly favored Trump. People suspected their neighbors of being Trump supporters more than they were willing to admit it. And I think that tracks.
I'm fascinated by the neighbor method and how it's a way around, I guess, the shy Trump voter, the whole, oh, my neighbor, I'm not much into politics, but my neighbor is just really MAGA, that sort of thing. That's a really interesting way around it. What's funny to me is I feel as though so many people in sports media operate almost the opposite when it comes to the neighbor, where they can't imagine their peers voting Trump, and they live in everybody I know voted for McGovern world. And well, okay, I want to get into that topic. I want to get into this topic of whether Trump's victory ushers in a culture change in how people in sports media operate. I think that's a very fruitful topic, but I do want to, if I'm going to do the whole, oh, I knew what was coming, I need to say that I was wrong about something else, which is I thought there would be far less. This isn't an oh boy. I thought there'd be far less.
Was wrong.
Oh yeah, where Ethan was wrong. No, I can't even do the cowherd on this one. But I thought there would be far less interest in this election, and I thought far less voting. And in the end, where they're going to tally it all up, it's going to come in under 2020, but not by much. Not by much. I thought 2020 would have far more participation than this election. So I wrote about how the vibes had shifted. People weren't as engaged. And I think I was, in the end, pretty wrong about that. So I will say that I was incorrect.
Yeah. And it would I hate the word misinformation and disinformation, but like in the day or two after the election, there was all of these tweets where it was like, well, there's 15 million less voters than this election. That proves 2020 was stolen, not 2020. And it's like, yeah, because they didn't. I actually fell for it, and then was like told, no, you're an idiot. They don't count all the votes on election day. Yeah. It'll come in close.
In my state of California, they take a month to count the votes, and then it adds more to the total. And so, yeah, in the end, it's going to look a lot like 2020. And so this is a nation that's still highly engaged in politics, way more than when we were kids in the 90s, where not as many people cared about politics. It is integral to the identity of so many people, which is perhaps unfortunate, but it just is what it is. And I think I was noodling around this topic a little bit with Nick Wright, but it's a big topic. And I think I also took a glancing blow at it when I wrote about Dan Le Batard. I wonder if some of these people who have platforms in sports media who've been overtly not just anti-Trump, which I think that makes a lot of sense. He's the president. He's a very controversial guy, to say the least, but also critical of. Well, I don't know. He did win the popular vote. Maybe he's just popular, and this is the mainstream. How do you even go down the list of old Trump's 8-year presidential career thus far? But I wonder if there's going to be a tonal shift at all. And just this admission of, look, we're operating in the sports space. Most of our fans and listeners vote for this guy or support him. I know that might be shocking to some people to hear that. But if you just look at the numbers, if you realize that, the heavy male skew in sports fandom and look at who votes for Donald Trump, that's the deal. And I know there's this perhaps a moral purity urge to go, I don't care. I don't care if most of my fans are into this guy. I still think this. And people will express that view, and that's a view in sports media. But I do wonder if there's this shift that nobody admits to, and this acknowledgement and realization that, no, this isn't just MAGA cultists. This isn't just a little fringe that we can all get together and stigmatize and regard as taboo. This is actually the majority of sports fans. And perhaps we need to reach some sort of accommodation and tonal change considering the new world we're in. Do you see any evidence of that, Ryan, or is it just going to be like it was?
ESPN was totally different this time around than the last two election cycles. And that's not only what was on their airwaves, but the way that the people conducted themselves on social media. And so there were two people that wrote about this that I want to give a shout out to. John Orand at Puck kind of got the ball rolling. And he wrote a thing in his newsletter that Greenie set the tone where he goes, I know elections weighing on a lot of people's minds, but if you're here on ESPN, you're here because you don't want to be thinking about this right now. And so we're going to talk about sports and be an escape. And I think that's what a majority of ESPN viewers, by the way, whether they vote Democrat or Republican, have wanted from the network for the last decade. And that was an on-air acknowledgement of it. And so that's something that Jimmy Pitaro and Burke Magnus have tried to be very cognizant of. And there's a part of Oren's thing that I disagreed with, and Bobby Burak wrote about it at Outkick. Bobby also reported that ESPN formally contacted their talents and was basically, I don't know the exact wording, but the equivalent of it was about shut the fuck up about the election. And but Oren said ESPN is not woke. He did a podcast with Ben Strauss where they talked about FS1 actually being more woke than ESPN. Yeah. I don't know if I'd go that far because it hasn't been that long since, Caitlin Clark was coming on the scene as a rookie, and everybody at ESPN who was talking about her was saying she's not going to be that good. They're not bullying her. Why are we even talking about her? This is a mid-off. And then she just surpassed anybody's wildest expectations. And the early discourse has been a little bit memory hold. So I'd like to see another kind of controversial topic along those lines where I don't think that ESPN skews in the proverbial woke direction before I'm willing to just, call this over. Yeah. But they did. Nobody, it wasn't even that they didn't talk about the election on the airwaves. I didn't see any of their people who have been zealous about politics in the past even tweeting about it on social media. And, if you just remember the way, Trump makes everybody so emotional, and I'm not going to say that that's unjustified. People can feel however they want about anything. I don't care. But I just noticed that there were no overwrought tweets from ESPN talents about this country is over. And so I don't know whether, I assume that whatever message was delivered from ESPN brass to them was just heard loud and clear, or if there's an understanding hey, maybe we'd rather if we had the MSNBC audience, but we have an audience of sports fans that, as you said, skews Trump supporting, and we got to serve that audience sports talk and just keep out of this other lane.
Yeah, there's a little detente, this idea that this is a space where we're going to talk about the thing you want and not alienate you because we think it's so important to lecture you, which clearly doesn't seem to be working. It just doesn't seem to be working. Maybe if it was working, one could make an argument for continuing to do it. I thought the Ben Strauss, my namesake, the argument that FS1 is more woke than ESPN was interesting. A little Nixon goes to China. I didn't ask Nick about that. There's only so much you can talk about, but I don't know. It seems like that's drafting off just the choices made by individuals. When we say this is more than that, we're talking about a few individuals and strong personalities. And Nick is just taking off like a rocket ship over there, and he's team blue.
I mean, it'd be like him and Joy Taylor, but that's about it. The rest, Colin is a tough guy to nail down politically. Emmanuel Acho actually is a tough guy to nail down politically. That's part of why he's so exciting, is because you don't know what his take on any given issue is going to be. James Jones or Chase Daniel, nobody knows what they think about the election, or at least I don't. And I feel like I'm one of the most engaged sports media viewers there is. And so if I don't know, I feel like almost nobody does. But that's what's known as a humble brag.
I don't know. That's something you want to brag about, but we appreciate it as listeners. Continue.
I mean, I guess that just boils down to Nick Wright, who was signed a new deal with Fox for substantial amount of money, and is being billed in, at least in that story that broke the news, but front office is the future face of FS1. He's not shy about how he feels politically, just as he wasn't shy about saying, I consider myself very liberal on your podcast. And so, from that sense, yeah, I guess you could say that, because if he's the future face of the network and he's made this political stance clear. But I'll go back to that Caitlin Clark early rookie and WNBA discourse, and I don't think you're going to see anything like that, like volume of takes that all skew in one direction on FS1, like you saw on ESPN at that time. And I guess, Stephen A. pushed back, and at times Wilbon pushed back, and Shannon Sharpe pushed back. But the people who were allowed to have the final word were very strongly rowing in one direction that I think got later discredited.
I would agree with that. And I thought that Fox generally had more reasonable takes on that. But I also think, and this is my personal opinion, that the Fox Sports product just tends to be better. And so it's downstream of that. It just tends to be a better product. It tends to be more anchored in the sports reality versus drafting off social media opinion. And so that, I think, is a continuance of the pattern that I've seen. I just prefer the FS1 product. I don't reject everything out of ESPN, but it feels a little synthetic. It feels a little contrived to me. I think the Ben Strauss argument also almost reflects a progressive worldview where it's, if you're not with us, you're against us, where it's, well, Stephen A. is friends with Sean Hannity. And it's just, well, I don't have much of an indication that Stephen A. Smith is a conservative based on his commentary. He's just somebody who believes that he can still be friends with somebody like Sean Hannity. And that gets us to this next issue, which is this conversation that has bubbled up of the liberals need their own Joe Rogan. The Democrats need their own Joe Rogan. Who's going to be the Joe Rogan to message to these men who are fleeing the party in droves? I think Matt Iglesias said that it's Bill Simmons. What do you think of that discourse? You're shaking your head. What do you think of that discourse of the Democrats need a Joe Rogan?
Joe Rogan was the Democrats' Joe Rogan, and they tried to purge him. This is
what I'm saying. Yeah,
it's memory hold. He endorsed Bernie Sanders, and I don't remember whether it was for 2020 or 2016. Probably 2020. I think he would have preferred that Bernie Sanders defeat Joe Biden and be the Democratic nominee. And then, during COVID, the left went on this crusade to try to get him dropped from Spotify, and pushed him to the right. And it's the same thing. Elon Musk used to be a Democrat supporter. And there's that famous tweet of the California regional, I don't know, is she a representative or what, where she tweeted, "Fuck Elon Musk," because he opened the factories during COVID. He responds, "Message heard loud and clear." And now he is, in a lot of people believe, the shadow president-elect. And so these people were in the Democratic tent, or at the very least not in opposition to them, and they were pushed out over purity concerns, and then became very powerful adversaries.
I don't know.
And Bill Simmons isn't going to be the Democratic. Bill Simmons isn't going to be the Democratic Joe Rogan, because you don't think he could have had Kamala on this election? I feel like he took a look at her. I don't know. Maybe she wasn't presented to him, but if I had to bet, if there was some clairvoyant spirit that could confirm our suspicion on bets, I would bet that he took a look at her and was like, I don't think she's going to be very good content on my podcast.
Yeah.
And so, and she went on Shannon Sharpe, and I didn't see anybody talking about it other than Jason Whitlock. And So it's just
here's my take. Because I'm not a racist like all of these progressive journalists right now, I can clearly see that Shannon Sharpe is the Joe Rogan of the Democrats. I can see that. I mean, they can't even, they just need a white guy, these people. But what about Shannon Sharpe? What about that? What about that?
I guess the thing is that Rogan at time, like right now, his podcast just has more reach than anybody else's. And so they want somebody with this enormous reach. Although then you point out that Shannon Sharpe, his interview with Pat Williams was the most.
I said that as a joke, but I do kind of mean it. I mean, it's weird that they're talking about we need a liberal, we need a Democrat, Joe Rogan, blah, 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 blah. And I'm just looking. I mean, Shannon Sharpe literally had Kamala. It was not his best podcast. People like when the tea is spilled over there. That's not going to be exciting when she's on there. But that to me would be the most logical, organic, massive audience is had the politician on.
I think what the Democrats are more mad about is that they lost this firewall on distribution that they used to hold over Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Twitter got bought by Elon Musk. And then you can even throw Bezos and Twitch and the Washington Post in there too. For whatever reason, these people were more willing to play ball with like the Democratic Borg in recent memory than they were this time around. Maybe they read the room and said, we're going to lose. We don't want to be on the losing end of revenge from like the Elon Trump coalition. God, people are going to, if this gets aggregated, but
what do you mean? What aspect is going to get aggregated? It's a new world.
I don't know. People will be like, oh, look at him spouting these crazy conspiracy theories, but I really do think it was
okay. I need to let you say the crazy conspiracy
stuff that would have gotten censored in the past, or if not censored, then its reach would have been. They would have stepped on the scale to limit the reach. There was this New York Times story about how YouTube was allowing right-wing disinformation to flourish, and YouTube came out and said, people need to hear everything and make their own opinions. This was not the consensus.
Dude, that's not a conspiracy. That's just what happened. If you had tweeted 2 years ago, men aren't women, you would be banned from Twitter. I mean, there was clear censorship of certain ideological perspectives. And what ends up happening, it's this idea of you don't need a majority, you just need an alternative. Musk, by capturing Twitter and changing the political orientation and showing different things, then creates a problem for YouTube, as you're talking about, because YouTube, if everybody is censoring in one direction, YouTube can censor. But they have this threat of losing all this market share and all these young men and podcasters who are just going to make content on Twitter if they make it too constraining over there. If
or
Twitter
Rumble,
is an alternative. Or Rumble or whatever. So I think that was a definite dynamic, and it's one of the reasons why, like I said, I think there are legitimate concerns
Zuckerberg
with somebody.
Was definitely like it was a turning point, the Trump assassination attempt, which we've all but forgotten about. But, a few days after that, Zuckerberg tweets I'm not going to lie, that was pretty badass. And that just felt like a watershed moment where the internet beyond Twitter all opened up.
Well, it's also maybe why right now you're seeing all these sports journos and other journos announcing that they're leaving Twitter and posting their BlueSky account, which to me, it's crazy because that's not going to work. It's just not going to work. You're not going to make it happen. Threads run by Zuck could be an alternative to Twitter, and you're just bootstrapping to everything else within the Zuckerberg empire. But I don't think they trust him because of moments like that. And some other moments. I think they think that Zuckerberg is now also the enemy. So we can't go to Threads. And instead, we're going to try to make BlueSky happen, which, hey, Guy Gazunt, if you want to do that, you can do that. I just look at it as weren't we doing this a few months ago? I feel like this had already
They
happened where all
tried
these people were
BlueSky like
leaving.
5 times, and it just
Yeah.
they keep coming back. But it's like, yeah, oh no, Don Lemon's leaving Twitter. Like, please, like, hide your kids, hide your wife. Like, just, I don't know.
Like-
Some of these people have like way inflated. Like Jamie Lee Curtis, oh man, I can't hear from her anymore. Kill me.
I didn't know she was on Twitter. I had no idea she was on Twitter. But you're seeing that in sports where they're leaving, they're going to BlueSky. I respect their decision. If they make it happen, they make it happen. And I'll go, hey, I didn't know you guys as a critical mass could do that and make BlueSky a thing. But I feel like I've seen this happen over and over again. In a way, I'm sympathetic to what they're doing because I think it matters immensely that Musk runs Twitter. I think it matters immensely. It's why some of the analysis retrospectively of the election, I think, doesn't totally grapple with how much trouble the progressive set is in. The Democrats will eventually win another election. We have this binary choice, the pendulum swings. But as far as the progressive, social justice, woke, whatever you want to call it, the issue set, it's been dealt a serious blow. A lot of that is because the information keep of Twitter has been captured. And on multiple fronts, it presents a problem for the ideology that opposes the person running it. One is simply that all this counter messaging gets shared freely, uncensored. The other is that it operates as a central nervous system for journalists to just arrive at this emergent consensus that we all feel this way. We all want to get this person fired. We all want to message that. And they can't do it. It's almost like I'm watching a mouse. This is a grim analogy.
Like 8 years ago, the New York Times, 8 years ago, the New York Times would have had the power to put pressure on YouTube. And now the Times reaches out to people like Tucker Carlson and others, just shared the letter from the writer in advance, so you know the hit piece is coming. And like YouTube is just like, we're not scared of the New York Times. You guys can't tell us what to do. And just like that I didn't even see the story when it came out. I only saw the backlash to it before. And there was just like this idea that like nobody has to listen to them. And I've also noticed that while we're on this topic, the Chicago NBC affiliate, which leads into the Today Show, is on in my household in the morning. You might shock you that that's not my primary decision, but I'm in there, it's on, and I'm absorbing some of it. And, there's been a tone change on the Today Show where they're like, presenting news about Trump unemotionally, and they're still like they're still like saying, oh, Pete Hegseth said he doesn't want women in combat, and they're saying that expecting their audience to take it negatively and feel a certain way about
cares.
it, but they're not. Savannah Guthrie isn't up there bashing Trump, and the correspondents are presenting kind of facts without editorializing them, and it feels like about 20% different than it used to.
Yeah. By the way, what did Trump lose Illinois by? It was something shocking. I want to see the final the final total, because that was one of the more shocking results of the election. I think maybe we'll close out the politics topic. 1 second. I just want to see that. About 10%. Jesus, that's insane. So I think you're kind of the minister of inflation. You were big on talking about inflation and price sensitivity. And that was obviously a factor in the election. But I think it's become part of a cope for people who didn't like the result of the election. A subset of smart people right now are saying, well, look, and I saw somebody I follow for a lot of football analytics, and he wanted Kamala to win, and he immediately pivoted to, actually, she overperformed. She overperformed because all these
because
countries are picking out.
every incumbent like lost an election.
Every incumbent lost an election. So actually, and I think that analysis is not true, because you're comparing it to these countries with parliamentary systems that have these massive shifts. We've got this binary where people are locked in religiously to their choice. And not only that, in 2022, inflation was just raging, and the Democrats did quite well in their midterms. I think
that was year one of inflation. It really raged for 2 years. So it was a compounding effect. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I get that it's a bit of it almost takes a while for people to wake up to something. I understand that, but I guess what I'm saying is that culture matters massively in American elections. And if you look at the registration numbers in 2022, it was trending in the it was sort of trending. It was trending one way, and then it went the other way after the Dobbs decision. In Pennsylvania, there's been analysis and charts on this. I think culture matters a lot. So does the economy. They kind of work together, where if you feel as though the people running things are failing economically, then their culture arguments start to get more annoying and hold less purchase. Their gods look weak.
And the cities that they have monopolies over had a worse response to COVID and kept the schools closed longer, had worse inflation. The crime has soared. In Chicago, the mayor is talking about raising property taxes by $300 million. And just they already went up 10%. And it's what are you I don't understand. Do you want everybody who can leave to leave? That's the other aspect of it. And Ezra Klein has talked about this, that the Democrats who have the stranglehold on cities have greatly discredited the National Party because they've been governing poorly.
I think Klein has been really frank, and the battle for the soul of the party will be a battle decided by whether people like himself are listened to or they just cover their ears. Felt like I said the registration was trending in the correct direction earlier when I was talking. Was that a Freudian slip? How did my neighbor vote? I'm just throwing things out there, just fodder to be considered. But I think that there are bigger problems than just this is a cycle determined by inflation. Young men leaving in droves is crazy. And if you're the Democratic Party, that's just a cohort you've been able to rely on. There's some polling that suggests that they lost 18 to 25, which is insane. There's a lot of contradictory polling, some of it's exit polling, but it's clear that when they do these events, when the conservatives do these events on these campuses, that they've been having tons of frat boys show up and they've been registering tons of people. There are all these celebrations all over TikTok in SEC country. And you can say, oh, well, those are the SEC schools, but that wasn't the case in 2016. Culturally, there is a problem here. There is a clear culture problem here. And maybe collectively they'll be able to address it and reverse it and find their own Rogan. But I think to be in denial of it and try to come up with the analytics explanation that this is only because of inflation, nothing else is happening. You talk to enough people, I think Ezra Klein is more on the button of what's happening. I know Sam Harris had a podcast where he was kind of equally anti-Trump as he was angry at the Democrats because he hates Trump so much and he feels like they failed him. But a lot of those analyses, I think, are correct. They're in a bad spot.
It would be fascinating to watch a double-blind experiment where the Democrats had a living, breathing primary instead of booting Joe when it was too late or having and then because Kamala ran against Biden and Bernie Sanders in 2020, and she got under 1% of the vote. This isn't someone who has proven that she can galvanize an electorship, whatever,
She ran
govern.
one of the worst. She ran one of the worst presidential campaigns I've seen in my life. I know it was truncated. I know people go, "Well, she only had a couple months," and I'm just trying to
No,
speak as objectively.
they knew for like 2 years that Biden wasn't going to run.
And I think Bill Maher made the point that's plenty of time, and it might have been too much time. I think if the election had been held in September, she would have done better. And again, I just think there are factors beyond the broader economy. And the good news for Democrats is I think there is. I know people come to us for the political analysis. Hey, this is just my political analysis, folks. This is just what it is. I think there's hunger for a normal Democrat. I think that the party altogether hasn't been wholly rejected. When somebody like John Fetterman goes outside the script on Israel, and I know that's a particular topic, people are surprised that even though the entirety of media is just swinging against him, his approval rating just goes up and up and up. So I think that it's almost like it's a matter of breaking up with the media and breaking up with the media consensus that is shrinking, being rejected by a lot of people, especially young men, and being rejected in part because the enemy from their perspective holds this information keep, and they can't do the old playbook of we're going to form a consensus, we're going to cancel anybody who disagrees, and we're just going to create this majority based on fear and based on agreement. That just doesn't work anymore. And I think we're seeing the downstream effects of that not working anymore in the result and in the culture altogether.
Yeah. It just, it's been harder for young men to become good earners and like meet a mate. And so you can say, oh, well, they're not entitled to this and F them. And like, this is misogynist. But I think that is a factor in this because for like whatever reason, it just, they're not advancing the same ways as they might have like a generation or two ago.
I don't even know if it's that, because I hear that sometimes. And then you'll get this reaction of, oh, well, these incels, and Scott Galloway, at least from the lefty side, has tried to address the issue, but it's all about, and I go, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm a millennial, but I'm just observing culture. And it seems like the guys who get laid hate you just as much as the guys who don't. It seems like they all hate you. They just don't like you. They think you're prissy and preachy and scoldy and are going to start, I don't know, throwing a little hysterical fit over a joke about Puerto Rico. And they don't like you.
Is it fair to say that this was the delayed comeuppance for the lockdowns?
I think there was an element of that. I do. I think there is a little bit of it because we do that in American politics where Obama becomes a little bit of the delayed comeuppance for the Iraq War. Trump, round one, might have been a delayed comeuppance for the bank bailouts. And this, in a way, might have been the post-COVID election. I think that was part of it. I think there was a degree that people accepted because it was fog of war, and it was, I get that my politician just had to make the call that they had to make. And then after a while, people looked back on it and went, I had to do that? Why'd I have to do that? I'm kind of resentful about that. I think there might have been an element of that playing a factor.
It's like it caused these business closures, it caused learning delays, and it caused greater inflation in the regions that enacted these things and greater crime increase. And so, this is a situation where we did have a double blind experiment. We had the red states and red cities open up and not perform any worse from like a disease and death perspective from the regions that closed down and had these second order effects from those close downs. And so I do think that was a factor, and not a lot of people are discussing it. Like, it's crazy, like all the mask mandates and the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns. It wasn't that long ago, but we want to forget about it.
I think you are correct. And I think that was probably a factor in an election is just a combination of so many. And obviously people will be more likely to say that it was mine. That's what the factor was. But that's something I was trying to communicate to Lebitard, to what you're talking about when I wrote what I wrote, which is that you're attributing the way the area surrounding you has swung heavily to the Republican side is about racism and misogyny, perhaps, and whatever else. And I think that a lot of it was what you were talking about, Ryan, which is that we ran a double blind experiment and Florida was more open. And I think a lot of the people in that state, in that area, went, I appreciated that. I like that. And that determines my vote. I'm just,
and there's
again, I don't
there's a
live
third
there,
order effect too, because there was population shift from blue to red regions that's going to affect the electoral college in future elections. So they're going to be paying for that for a while.
Yeah, we'll see. The history, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see what will happen. Obviously, there's going to be some chaos in the Trump administration. Events will determine it. We had no idea that Obama was going to be the presidential candidate in 2004. We had no idea that Donald Trump, of all people, was going to be the next presidential candidate in 2012. There's a lot out there that we do not know. Are there any other topics, Ryan, as you parent simultaneously podcasting?
We mentioned the polymarket founder briefly getting his phone seized by the FBI. And so, he put it out there after it happened. This is revenge for polymarket correctly picking the Trump election. No, it wasn't. This was revenge for the fact that he was running an unregulated, unlicensed, illegal casino while the competitors of his were following the law and embroiled in this years long legal dispute to get what polymarket does to be legal. So Kalshi is backed by, one of the KKR founders and a number of these Silicon Valley mavens in your region. And they have been they fought the government for years for the right to take these bets at the time that polymarket was just taking them. And so they're oh, well, we're going to be polymarket's we're going to run out of another country. And it's but your founder's just living in Soho and everyone who works for you is living in New York. This wasn't because people betting on Trump on your platform is not why the FBI seized your phone. But this might be the correct strategy on his part to get Trump to think that he's some type of politically persecuted by the left guy, and they're going after him before Trump comes into power, and so he then stops any type of investigation into them.
That appears to work well on Trump. That's what I'm reading, at least, that if you have also been hassled by the feds and are of a similar disposition, he might look favorably upon that. That's something we call, or I don't call it, or we don't call it, but forced teaming that con artists use to establish that we're in the same boat in order to get you to come over to do what I want you to do. We're the same. We got the same problems. We're on the same team, and the feds are against us. I think that's a very smart play. Smart play by polymarket, man. I don't know much about the intricacies of that. I do think there's probably an argument against whether we should have these massive election gambling markets. It seems wrong. I have intellectual.
It got decided. They're legal. It's over.
I know.
That's done. That horse has left the barn. The other thing I wanted to talk about was I had this scoop earlier this week that Michigan and Ohio State have it written into their TV deals that they will not play night games after daylight savings time. And it's kind of crazy because NBC is airing these games at night, and it means for the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, they just don't have the option of having Michigan or Ohio State unless the schools like agree to it. Can you imagine if if like the Chiefs were like, we're not playing Monday night, sorry, like, and the NFL had to like schedule around it, like it's a crazy thing, like the college sports and all the fiefdoms and the way that like these like supposed partners wield their leverage over each other is just like endlessly fascinating to me.
It's a mess. It just seems like there needs to be somebody in charge of it all, so it's not like herding cats. And yet that's very difficult. And yet the sport thrives regardless. It just seems like a sport that's been
it's not even that it thrives regardless. I think it thrives in part because it's just so chaotic. These schools will like betray each other in an instant. They switch conferences. They kick teams out, or they don't kick teams out of their conferences, but that's coming. Like they're Big Ten. Like, why do Ohio State and Michigan need to share money equally with Purdue and Northwestern? Like, in what world does that make sense? Because they don't have to. They can just be like, we don't want to share money equally with you anymore. Do you want to accept less or get kicked out of the package altogether? And what we're like entering, and the money's so big right now that like the way it shakes out in the future is going to be really interesting. There's going to be some type of alliance between the Big Ten and the SEC that squeezes everybody else out and makes them like accept whatever terms are given to them. But like, then how is that going to affect the smaller schools that think that they're in this club but may not be permanently in it?
All I know is that if UC Berkeley leaves the Atlantic Coast Conference, I don't know what I'll do. That's a tradition that I can't imagine not being in the ACC anymore as a Cal fan. That'll be very difficult to reckon with. I don't know if people care that much about conferences. This is what we're learning. They just like the brands. They like the teams. Nobody is focused on conferences on the basketball side during the NCAA tournament. They just want the big teams playing one another. And anything else is anything else, I think, is one of the upshots.
Yeah. This podcast is interesting. I think it went in directions that I didn't necessarily anticipate, but I don't know. I'm interested to see how the audience receives it.
I am as well. We've got a variety of opinions. People are going to be mad. I don't know what people are going to be mad at. That's something that's going to be difficult for me to predict. Maybe we should have been more Trump critical in this episode, perhaps. Maybe. I'm not sure. Maybe that's what
look, as Nick Wright told you yesterday, that market is covered. If you're looking for people to be critical of Trump, like, I don't think you're going to have any difficulty finding that. We try to say things that are different than like what is being said in other platforms. And I just don't think that I have any fuel to add to the like negatives of Trump. I feel like that that land has been hoed. And so it's no pun intended.
Yes. I think that's the case. And I'm just fascinated by this topic. Obviously is just really interesting to me. The idea that young men and sports fans are going in the opposite direction of what the sports media consensus has been and how that's reckoned with, if at all, if it's even admitted to. I don't know how much they even know about it, Ryan. I think they just look at it in many instances as their bosses are being mean and forcing them not to talk. I don't know if they understand that the ground is shifting underneath our millennial feet, but we will talk about this in the future. This is just one data point. Give us some plugs.
I plugged my column from yesterday. That's that's 2 days ago now, but that was about what I got to plug, and just keep looking for my stuff at the New York Post. And good job by you.
Good job by you. Good parenting by you. Adorable baby.
Yeah, she's pretty good for 10 months. Like,
she's welcome back anytime. Thanks, Ryan.